Good evening. I'd like to call to order the public hearing on the fiscal year 2024-2025 operating budget for today, Thursday, February 15th, 2024 at 6:05 p.m. We'll begin with the roll call of the Finance Committee with Councilmember Jim Freya. Here. Councilmember Johan Lopez. Present. Councilmember Doug Sutton. Present. Councilmember Heather Dunn. Here. And Councilmember Greg Burnett. I do not see any other members of the Finance Committee online, and we have a quorum. So with that, we'll move forward. We look forward to members of the public to provide their input and comments on the operating funding proposed for the city departments, the Board of Education, and the grant agencies. The public hearing tonight will not address those items in the capital budget. We're only focusing on the operating budget for this public hearing. And capital budget items would be items such as building construction or any infrastructure projects. Our goal always is to keep taxes as low as possible by allocating those funds necessary to maintain and in some cases, improve services to our residents. We plan to draw down on our rainy day fund or general fund balance to provide tax relief to our residents during this rather difficult budget season. We are in the early phases of the budget process, with the initial recommended mayor's operating budget being presented this week at the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the BET meeting on Monday, and to the Common Council this week on Tuesday. That recommendation, which consisted of a $442 million operating budget, included a proposed 4.5% or $10 million increase to the Board of Education's current operating budget and a 4.4% increase to the city operations. This year, as has been stated several times, we are presented with several budget challenges and priorities that we have to face. We have to make some really key decisions on what we can focus on now and what we might have to phase in over the next few budget cycles. Similar to what you have to do in your households when economic times get tough. After hearing your comments tonight during the public hearing, the Common Council Finance and Claims Committee will conduct a special meeting next Thursday, February 22nd, to discuss and recommend the operating budget cap. The cap represents the maximum limit on the total appropriation for the upcoming fiscal year. This recommendation will then be presented to the full council for their review and approval on Tuesday, February 27th, and in turn, with a window of approving the total cap by March 5th. Once the cap is set, it is then passed on to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the BET, who will conduct departmental meetings and reviews during the month of March, which will culminate with the BET conducting a public hearing on Wednesday, March 20th, on the tentative operating budget plan. So I encourage you to please mark your calendars for another opportunity to share your thoughts to the Board of Estimate and Taxation as it relates to the operating budget. As we begin the public hearing, those individuals who wish to speak tonight related to the operating budget, and again, we're only focusing on the operating budget, may raise their hand electronically to be recognized. And if you're here in person, you can sign into the sign-in sheet. Please state your name and your address for the record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. We will provide you with a 30-second indicator that you have 30 seconds remaining in your comments. This way, everyone will have an opportunity to share their thoughts. We will also have translation online via Zoom for Spanish and Haitian Creole translations. As of this afternoon, we received no emails related to tonight's public hearing to be entered into the record. And at this time, we'd like to invite Mayor Rilling to provide a few opening comments before we start.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. First of all, excuse me, I do want to thank the Finance and Claims Committee. I want to thank the BET. You know, this is a very, very challenging and difficult time. I know I say this every year, but this year in particular. Also want to thank members of our finance team that work at City Hall. We have Chitsime Lamb and Agnes Kawai. And also I notice we have Henry Dakowitz here as well. As I mentioned, this is going to be a very challenging year because of the reval that we just had in 2023. It always makes it a little bit of a challenge. We're working very hard and working long hours trying to make sure that we keep our tax base as low as possible while still providing the services that members of the community expect. I know this is about the operating budget, but I did have a conversation with Dr. Estrella a few moments ago. She indicated to me that there was concern among some of the parents about the capital budget with the lockers being removed from the capital budget. I explained to her that when I first saw that, I knew right away I had to put that back in the capital budget because I've been to some of the middle schools and I know how well, let's say that the lockers are not very pleasant, not very, they're kind of torn apart and they've been there for a long time. So we are going to put that back in the capital budget. But again, the operating budget we're talking about tonight, that's the budget that most significantly affects the members of the community, the residents, and it's a very long work in progress. What you see right now is probably going to be changed several times, but we'll get it done. And again, thank you to Finance Committee of the Council and the BET and our staff at City Hall. But again, thank you, Mr. Burnett, for your hard work. I know we have been to my office several times over the past couple of days going over the numbers and crunching the numbers. So thanks again.
Thank you. And I also like to recognize, I see online, Councilmember Barbara Smith. So let the record show her presence. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to see if any members of the Finance Committee has any questions before we start. Or excuse me, any comments before we start the public hearing? Okay, very good. So with that, if the IT team can, anyone who wishes to speak, if you can raise your hand electronically, and the IT team will recognize you.
We have in person, we have Liette. If you could please come up, state your name and address for the record. And I believe try to keep it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Liette Bechervais. I reside at 363 Rowayton Avenue. I'm here to talk about the capital budget, even though you mentioned that we're only talking about the operational budget. But yes, my comment is in reference to replacing the middle school lockers at Rowayton Middle School. And so I've been 6 years. I've been the PTA president now over 3 years, but I've been with the PTA for 6 years. This has been a topic of conversation beyond 6 years. And as you've mentioned, Mayor, they are in very old, decrepit state and need to be removed. So they were installed in 1966 when the school was built. They're extremely narrow. I mean, for us parents to figure out how to accommodate our kid to fit all their huge thick binders. Never possible. So then they end up carrying all these very thick, heavy binders in their backpacks all day long. It's because either the lockers don't open, again, they're too narrow, too small. Some are falling apart. And I mean, the backpack doesn't even fit in the locker, because now there are these massive backpacks. And it's just overall safety for everyone. Having all these backpacks in the classrooms, you know, there's tripping and falling involved and just a cluster of backpacks everywhere. So it's just not safe. So unfortunately, my child is graduating, so she will not see the new lockers, hopefully. But I'm still here advocating for the future generation of Rhoton students. And we definitely need to update and bring us up into the future generation of to just make our school much better for the whole community. And that's all I had to say.
As I mentioned, I've been to the schools and I agree with you, and the money's going back in the capital budget.
Awesome, good.
Thank you for those comments. Is there anyone else who is in the audience here in the council chambers that wishes to speak? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to those that are online.
Diane Larsa. Please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I want to thank the city for having a hybrid meeting in the first place. Really appreciate it tonight for me. Anyway, first, I know and appreciate and have read about the quotes in the newspapers about an especially tough year. Let's find creative solutions. I ask that this council look at first review my operating budget public hearing comments for the last 10 years, maybe 14 years in our mayor's predecessor. Please, because I may be cut off at 3 minutes. The first way that we can address the important and the difficult times is to look at where we can cut costs in the operating budget. So let's first go to the NPS, especially in light of Dr. Estrella's comments. For several years, I've discussed how they can reduce their energy costs by having a much more robust, aggressive solar, heat pump, geothermal for existing buildings, not only new buildings, new schools, as well as additions. This is something that schools throughout the state have done. But in Norwalk, our policy is costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars in energy costs, and it's time that we stop this poor policy. I'm on record with it, and some of you know about that. We reduce our fuel use. We stop. It's good to remove underground fuel tanks, but we immediately go to gas instead of looking at other renewable energy sources. I also wanted to state, for the record, I believe the DPW should adopt the waste management from the school system. It's ridiculous and inefficient to have two different groups negotiating contracts. And also the fact is there's very little, if any, recycling taking place in our school system. I've been on several committees over the last 20 years that have tried to handle this. And there's very little, if any, food waste management that could be done, and it's curriculum enhancement. Lastly, I think we should end the Welcome Center rental and shift it to a city-owned property. That would save us lots of money, lots of money. On the city side, we again have to look at the grant, a full-time grant coordinator, because we have not gained, we have gotten many, many grants, but we could even get more to offset the tax burden. I think we need to trim the chief of staff budget. I'm sorry, everyone else held it to 3%. The DEI budget, which quite frankly, I find is important, very important. I lobbied for it, but too high. And again, we reduce our energy use, reduce the electricity with ground-mounted solar, canopy solar, and rooftop solar on existing buildings. And we
You're over
also,
3 minutes. If you could wrap it up,
I
please.
will wrap up. Lastly, we have to increase our revenues. And that includes full-time grant, create energy, which is almost like revenue, enforcement fines, and let's look at companies donating in exchange for naming rights of things like the new football stadium that we're going to build. Thank you very much, and I hope you'll take my comments after over 10 years more to heart. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Lisa, please state your name and your address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Can
can.
you? Okay, I didn't hear Britton. I just heard Lisa, but I'm assuming it's me. Thank you. Lisa Britton, 19 Shorefront Park. It's difficult to comment specifically on the budget without seeing the final amount of the grand list, so we can estimate the mill rate and see how much residential will have to perhaps pick up the slack for the commercial market. But my comments are going to be made to the following line items: the debt service and contingency fund, public works, and the Board of Ed. Our debt service has obviously increased due to the 2 new school constructions of Norwalk High School and Sono, the Sono School. But when you talk about the contingency line item for collective bargaining contracts not yet completed, I must confess I'm more concerned about what percentage the state will actually end up reimbursing us for Norwalk High School if you factor in some of the unknowns with any construction site, the timeline for construction, and the short and long-term cost of money. So I really think that debt service line is going to be something that we're going to have to look at. Public Works, personally, I think this department has been consistently underfunded for the 26 years that I've lived here. And that's a shame, because I think that their work is probably the most visible part of our great city. I'd like to go on the record and raise a concern I've had for a few years now about the potential overlap functions of the newer and separated departments of the Economic, Community, and Development Group and Traffic, Mobility, and Parking. I personally have never understood why some of those functions and the respective funding didn't sit under DPW. I haven't seen the line items yet, but there's got to be some overlap and efficiencies there. Finally, I support the 4.5 increase for the Board of Ed. I did read somewhere that the superintendent said more money was needed for more prep time to relieve the teacher stress. But I'd like to offer up that the teachers might not need more prep time if they weren't being micromanaged by central office and what I see as a growing administrative staff. We do need more aides in the classroom for the kids, but we don't need more expensive top-down supervision, given that our test scores are tanking along with behavior in the classroom. I'm also concerned about staff turnover, extended leaves of absence, and several high-profile resignations from principals and teaching staff over the years. Lacking confidence in this Board of Ed, I'm disinclined to give them any extra discretionary funds. And just one final comment. One of the news articles said that 18 new positions were being requested and none were being funded. I'd like to make the case for hiring additional zoning and blight enforcement staff. And I don't know which department or line item that sits under, but quite frankly, these positions would easily pay for themselves through fines, etc. Not to mention the priceless goodwill they bring towards cleaning up neighborhoods and helping ensure buildings are safe and not overcrowded. And they'd also put on notice those landlords cheating the tax rolls with their illegal apartments from the very revenue that we need to run the city. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your comments.
Constantin S., please state your name and your address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hey, hey everyone, Konstantin Stoyanov, 4 Wallace Avenue, East Norwalk. Again, first, thank you very much for organizing this, very helpful. And it's my first time attending. So my main 2 points, it's hard for me to understand the percentage increase in all four and all five budgets. So after a very high increase in all four, why do we have another increase of 4.5%, which is way above inflation? I just don't understand why that is, and if there's a good reason, what are the tangible benefits to citizens? Like, it's really, really hard to understand. So for me, unless there's a good reason, like, we should never have a budget above inflation. Like, it's just kind of not, I don't think it's responsible. And if there's a good reason, like, it should be clearly explained. And the other point is on the rainy day fund. Yeah, I understand the times are tough. They're always tough. They're never easy. But if we feel like we need to use the rainy day fund in these times where employment is as high as it can be, like, I don't see these times as kind of rainy day times. So if we use the rainy day funds in these years, what happens if we have a recession? So just kind of looking at these two things, I really don't understand why we're doing these things. And we can go into more detail on some line items, but for now, let's just keep it high level. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now. Mr. Burnett, there is none. There's no more.
There's no other individuals that have, or residents that have their hands raised? Okay. Why don't we just give it one more moment? If anyone else wishes to raise their hand and add any comments, you can do it at this time, and you'll have 3 minutes to share your thoughts. And I see that Councilmember Dewan Wiggins has joined the meeting, so let the records indicate that he's a member of the Finance Committee. Okay. If there's no one else who wishes to speak, we will adjourn the public hearing at this time on the recommended operating budget. Thank you for your participation.